Welcome to the Innovation Meets Leadership podcast. Real inspiration for real innovators. If you're looking for innovation and leadership transformation, your journey starts now.
Welcome to the Innovation Meets Leadership podcast. I'm your host, Natalie Born. Hey, if you're enjoying these innovation insights, I'd love for you to hit the subscribe button so you never miss a future episode. By following Innovation Meets Leadership, you're staying at the forefront of trends and real-world innovation that guides today's innovators. And today is no different when we want to talk about innovation in the world of events and communication and training. I think of one person. I think of Scott Smith. He's the CEO of True Network Advisors, where he leads trainings and premier industry events. And whenever I see one of his events on LinkedIn, I get so excited because I know the people there had an incredible time and they learned so much. So you're in for a special treat today because we're going to talk about how to lead from a place of community and how to use communication to build that community. Welcome to the podcast, Scott.
It's great to be here, Natalie. It's always good to see you. And as we get, we're looking forward to next year's events. And so I hope we can match schedules and we can have you join us again.
Yeah, it'll be fun. Well, I love your events. And I think about the fact that what I do, with speaking, I get to go to a lot of events, but there's something special that stands out about what you guys do at True Network. There's a special magic that happens when you guys pull teams and people and events together. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about how you founded this organization and like what was the heart behind what you guys do, because I feel like you guys do it at a top-notch level.
Well, thank you. We've certainly become a little bit obsessed with creating experiences. But the origin story, I spent almost all of my career in employee benefits. And we had sold a business. And as I was trying to figure out my next step in life, it wasn't even my idea. I had some friends who encouraged me to start a quote unquote association of employee benefit agencies because they thought it would be cool. And there wasn't one that they liked in place. And so that seed just kind of germinated as I thought about it. And the cliff noted version is that there was not another association in our industry or group that was run by someone who was a peer.
Wow.
And the original goal was to start out sort of like a small study group and only have 25 member agencies to get this really tight collaboration. I was going to stay at home and watch my kids grow up and work 30 hours a week and never have another employee or team member. Fast forward, we're at 93 member agencies and growing with a robust team, and the business model's changed from the original plan, but it's at a place that I never could have dreamed really.
Yeah.
And that is a way cliff noted version of what happened.
Well, I think what gets me excited about that story is that people asked you to start something. And that's a powerful way to drive demand. It's not this, hey, I sat in my living room in the evening and had this idea. It's literally the demand driving the start of a business, which is pretty powerful. And that almost equally, creates this immediate need and hunger for what you're doing, which is actually a really exciting way to start something.
Yeah, I've said when people have asked me, quote unquote, about success, I started True when I was 45, and I liked my career because, I had pretty humble beginnings in a trailer in rural Alabama. And so I was very fortunate to get an industry that was able to provide for me and my family, but I didn't love it.
Yeah.
And the only way I was able to start True is because, I was good and kind to people along the way, along the journey. And I had enough trust in those individuals that they gave me the idea. And then they actually helped me when I was recruiting in the initial agencies. We started in 2016 with 19 agencies, probably 10 or 12 of which I knew. So there would be no True without me having a group of people who said, I kind of believe in you, Scott. I really don't know what you're doing, but I'm going to be a part of it.
Yeah. Well, that's powerful. I honestly didn't know a whole lot about your backstory, but that's so fascinating to me because you can tell that you love what you do and you create that excitement for everyone that's at one of your events. And it's really not an event. It is an experience. I mean, that's what you're creating there. Talk a little bit about how you were able to land on cultivating these experiences. I'm sure that, it's only grown over time and that maybe you didn't start knowing everything about how to cultivate an experience. So Talk to me about some of the things that you used as decisioning levers along the way to begin to grow these experiences and create them.
Yes. Well, that it's an understatement saying that I didn't know anything about events when I started. Our first event in New Orleans in January of 2016, I called the event planner at the hotel. I called her and said, "Hey, I think there's a mistake on your pricing you sent me because it says here that coffee is $130 a gallon. I think you probably meant 13." And she was like, "No, no, no, that's the price." And then she said, I said, "What is for tea as well? That's just hot water." So I quickly, I had no experience, but what happened over the years is I wanted to deliver a really good learning experience first and foremost. So it started with the content. I wanted the agenda and the learning and the collaboration to be like nothing anybody had ever seen.
Mhm.
That's where it really started. Now, I did want to have music at every event in the very beginning. I could only afford certain local bands, and that was part of it. And what happened is when you fall in love with something, also, Natalie, I have to say this, I would be remiss if I didn't say this. Also, because a lot of my early clients were my friends and my close friends. And it just so happened that over half of them were women-led agencies. And I'm going to be serious. I could not BS my client base. Like, they knew me very well. They were not putting up with any sort of charm or salesmanship.
Yep.
And so it quickly became an obsession to deliver what I was promising to them, which was quality learning, the agenda to be tight and fun and unique. But we also were going to have some fun at the same time. And that was an edict from them. So one of the reasons they wanted me to start this group is that we don't want it to be stuffy. The typical insurance agency owner is a 64 to 66-year-old white male. And there's cigar smoking and golf. And
Yep.
what my client said is, we don't want that. We want the opposite of that.
Wow.
So we started having all the events be casual dress, down to jeans and shorts if it was in a warm environment. We worked on making sure that there was heavy on the collaboration and not as much just talking at someone.
Mhm.
There was a lot less, we call them partners, but many people call them vendors. Less vendor presentations because they can do that in their local market. They wanted to hear what was working from other people. And so listening was what was a key component in the very beginning for me to understand, okay, I hear what you say you want, and then let's apply some creativity in that to make it happen. And so that's evolved, from a 18-person first event to, I think our largest event next year will be approaching 500 people.
That's awesome. Well, and I'm spending a lot of time working with customers right now on the idea of customer obsession and learning from some of the best people in the business on how to be customer obsessed. And when I hear you talk and when I hear how you thought about things, it wasn't just the ability to promise it. It was the desire to truly deliver it and to even over deliver and to make it fun and to make it. I mean, like, I think about some of your events. You guys have, was it Cowboy Prom that you did? The one
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
was that you have so many really cool elements that make it people come to an environment where they're there to learn, but they're also there to have fun. And I think that's the best way to learn is to actually feel like you're having fun while you're doing it and not to have it be stuffy or boring. People are investing their time and you want them to feel like they're getting a good return on investment, especially if they're spending time away from their market or their family or their kids. You want them to not only be enriched by learning, but it should be fun while doing it. And I love that you bring these elements together.
I don't like words like obsession, but I use it and I just have to embrace it because it's a fine line between striving for perfection, which is a futile endeavor,
Yeah.
and being excellent. I think you have to lean towards sometimes acknowledging that you're trying to be perfect, but but you can't hold your team accountable to perfect. That's never going to happen. But the attention to detail, the focus on making sure we're having fun and learning. We always talk about our events. We want to accomplish a couple of things. We want to educate, motivate, and inspire. And we obsess over every single attendee. So we'll say, okay, there's going to be an account manager cohort, an operations leader cohort, CFO leader cohort, an owner of an agency cohort. And we put ourselves in the position of each attendee and say, okay, what is their experience going to be like?
Wow.
Is there something for them every moment? Do they have any uniqueness where they might need a shorter or longer break? People learn differently. So is it long format or short? So we do become obsessed, and we need to carry that obsession over to between events too. So I know we're not going to talk about a lot of that today, but that obsession really over the client, you nailed it. I think that's what separates okay and good for really great organizations.
Yeah, well, I would love to talk about that maybe a little bit because I feel like the challenging part of community, and when we talk about communities, is building that momentum over time. I mean, sometimes it can feel like it's a struggle to keep people connected, engaged, involved over time. And I'd love to know, I think probably the cohorts is one of the ways you do that so that people are kind of with like-minded people. But what are some other ways that you guys build that momentum over time so that these communities don't lose steam?
I think I'm going to talk about three components here. I'll touch on a couple of them really quickly because it's a foundation, but having a very clear mission that you can always go back to, mission statement or values that might have that go on a wall or website that you don't pay attention to. I mean, easy to understand, simple mission. Our mission at True is to help the agencies and the people grow, develop, and prosper.
Mhm.
That is it. That's the mission. So anytime we're evaluating an event concept, an event agenda, an outside program, another partner, we can always go back to, does this serve the mission? And then we added something recently called our identity. And I don't know where this came from. I'm sure I stole it from somebody because almost all good ideas are stolen. But what we're looking for are people who, this is our identity. We're full of smart, curious, kind people who crave collaboration and meaningful relationships and have all agreed not to take ourselves too seriously on this journey of life. That is who we want to attract. And it's okay. I gave a talk recently where I talked about being repulsive to some people. And it took me a while to get over that. I'm like, nobody wants to be repulsive to anybody.
Right.
But you know what? If you are and this isn't said in kindness, but if you're very buttoned up, I want to wear a suit to every meeting. I want only educational content, no nonsense. Scott knows, we do silly skits to open up, meeting. None of that. You're probably going to be a little bit put off by us.
Yeah.
And you have to embrace your mission and your identity to attract the people, because at some point, it's not like you as an entrepreneur leader attracting people and trying to be magnetic. The community itself is what perpetuates it, right? The people, the team members at True and the actual members, they're the ones that sort of self-select if someone, they're going to identify if someone's not great for the network. And that person there's a place for them. There's an island of very serious people for them somewhere to join. And so I think it's mission, identity, and then there's an element of creativity that you have to have. You have to still be obsessed with creating different experiences, trying different things, run experiments. We call it, my friend David Epstein, who's an author who spoke at one of our events recently, talks about running experiments. He's a scientist turned author about performance. And we just talked about this morning on the True team. We're going to try something. We're going to run an experiment, and we're going to put controls on the experiment. And you just have to become obsessive around that mission and identity, and then add some creativity and ingenuity along the way.
What I love about what we're talking about is when most people are starting organizations. I was just actually talking to a couple a few weeks ago, and we were looking at customer personas and looking at their new business or actually launching a new product. And he said, "No wonder so many companies fail." And I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "Well, it's so hard. Like it's so hard to get in the head of your customer and to really know what they want." And I'm like, "That's right. That's why you have to be constantly talking to them, constantly surveying them, constantly measuring what's working, what's not working, and then bringing that back and continuing to create." And so I love that you talked about that mission, the identity, and then the creativity, because those 3 areas are so critical, especially when someone is starting something new, but then also to have that longevity in what you do, to keep it going for years and years to come, to continue to keep those things at the forefront. Very, very positive, I think, forms of thought of how we can think about building leadership teams, building the work we do, and thinking about the world around us collectively.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk a little bit about communication. I think that, leaders obviously as they're building things, as they're launching companies, building ideas, one of the hardest things I think in community is to not come across as transactional. but to come across as authentic and real. And I would love to know you personally as a leader, like just interacting with you, the number of times I've interacted with you, you always come across very authentic, very real. Like you said, you don't BS your clients. But part of that is probably also you just understanding who you are as a leader and what you bring to the table, I would assume.
Oh gosh. Self-awareness is one of my favorite and least favorite topics because it's so hard. I'm sure that people listening all know a fair amount of people in their lives who are not self-aware, which makes me always think, okay, where's my blind spot here? Because I have to have one or two or three. I do think unabashedly being yourself. Some people are fortunate; they just find themselves early. They're innately just good at it. They just this is who I am, and not. I don't talk about like not an excuse. Some people say, "Well, I'm just perpetually late. I'm just a late person." That's BS. That's not true. But you know, I had a hard time early in my career. My clients were mostly HR leaders. That's just a female driven world.
Mhm.
And I had great relationships with a lot of my HR clients. I struggled with kind of the alpha male CFO president type. And that was a me thing. It wasn't anybody else. It was me just being more comfortable that women would understand me, trust me more. I could build trust more quickly. And I didn't learn to understand the type A alpha male or spend any time with that. What I've learned over the years is I am by nature silly, love music, unabashedly grew up to listen to old school R&B and hip hop, and just be yourself all the time. It doesn't care what anybody else thinks about you. Another good thing about being yourself all the time is if you are a not nice person, insert the inappropriate word of your choice there, you will quickly find out, right? If you're yourself all the time, what happens is typically if you're kind, and you're curious, thoughtful, and you're vulnerable, those are the traits that translate into trust. When people know, hey, that guy asked me questions a lot, maybe they can't even articulate it, but you ask way more questions, you want to get to know people, you're willing to share. And I'm not saying share, it's one of these tricks of life. You can't share and be vulnerable because you want something good in your life to happen back. You just have to do it because that's the right thing to do. And then it's the right moment. So, for example, I've shared with my audience a couple of times because it's been the right moment, personal stories about me and my life. I did grow up in that trailer. My dad was an alcoholic, but he was a wonderfully kind human being that had a disease he could not beat. And he took his own life. Sharing those things, anytime I share something like that, people immediately come up to me after and say, thank you. I went through the same thing in my family. And it just makes it, and people don't want to feel like they're alone. And a lot of times I think that happens where people just need to be, I don't want to say seen and heard. They just need to feel like, hey, I am not alone in this feeling that I'm having. That's an extreme example of vulnerability. But I think if you're real about it, you're transparent, you're vulnerable, like you care about them, you want them to succeed, your mission statement's real, like all that stuff that you're saying, I can trust you. And trust is really what you're after.
Well, I'm very appreciative for you raising some of these things. I think this is where a lot of leaders struggle, which is being able to share with people what they've been through, how what they've been through has shaped them into the leader they are today. And so oftentimes we put leaders on pedestals without seeing the other side of what they've actually been through. We don't even understand how they got where they are today. And so by putting them on a pedestal, oftentimes people feel like they can never rise to the occasion to do what that person's doing. But it's through this level of vulnerability when you actually share what's going on in your world, what you've been through, how that shaped who you are today, that people actually feel like, okay, you're a real person, you're relatable, and maybe I can do what you're doing too one day. And I think that's the hope that we want to give other people is that they're not alone and that you're not, Teflon, right? Like you can literally do what I'm doing if that's what you desire to do. And I think
Mhm.
that's really important. And it's something, and I don't know when this changed for us, but maybe it was 2020. But I feel like that kind of lever that people were holding on to of wanting to appear like they had it all together, I feel like it kind of broke when we saw people walking around in pajama pants and everything else we saw in 2020. And I was appreciative for us kind of leveling the playing field and humanizing leaders and humanizing each other and learning more about each other and our families and what's that cat behind you? What's his name? I just feel like there's something that changed and shifted that allowed people to actually be themselves and be able to present themselves as who they are.
It's an interesting dynamic because there's also the possibility that you over-index into, I talk about kindness all the time and transparency and vulnerability. It's easy to over-index into nice. And there's many times in leadership roles where you certainly can use all of the tools around kindness and vulnerability, but you can also operate from a position of truth and strength when you're trying to help someone perform better, or you're trying to help someone understand that, hey, you're not reaching your full potential. If I'm not honest with you here, that is not kind. Like, kindness sometimes gets a rap for being all nicey nice. Sometimes kind and transparency is saying, hey, you are crazy underperforming. Your job's at risk. Let's talk about, I don't want that to happen to you. I think you've got a wonderful potential, but here's where you're messing up. That's an area where I've probably grown the most, is understanding that it is the ultimate act of kindness is to be honest and have tough conversations with people.
Well, someone that was not known for being kind was probably Jack Welch, if
Mm-hmm.
I'm just being honest. And I
Mm-hmm.
remember hearing him speak at a kickoff in Chicago many, many years ago. He said something to me that's always stuck with me as a leader. He basically said, hey, if you notice something that's a blind spot in someone and you're their leader and you don't tell them and they go somewhere else and get fired for that, that was actually on you. That was not
Mm-hmm.
them. And it made me realize that, to your point, kindness is sometimes clarity. Kindness is sometimes honesty. Kindness is sometimes, we talked about this earlier, calling out the blind spot and helping them see that one exists, and then giving them choice to decide if they want to do anything about it to fix it. And if they don't, there are also consequences for that truth that they don't want to
Mm-hmm.
change, right? So I appreciate this conversation because oftentimes we think leadership and being kind means not telling the truth. And to me, clarity is kind. Being honest is kind. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've sat with someone who said, man, why didn't they just tell me that this was
Mm-hmm.
bothering me? This was bothering them that I was doing. And if they had told me, I would have fixed it. But they just danced around it. And then, 2 years later, they're let go and they never really understood why. That's not kind and that's not leadership. And I think we can all do better there.
Yeah, it's hard. It is hard. You know, the biggest mistakes I've made are in letting team members go when I've had to do that in a way that wasn't kind, meaning because I wasn't honest along the way and had those really hard conversations about how they were making other team members feel around. Sometimes you don't want to tell someone like, hey, I know you probably don't think this or know this, but you're coming across as not a nice, kind person,
Mhm.
and it's destroying team chemistry. And we have to address that. That's a hard conversation to have.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's hard. That's why leadership, that's why good leaders are so rare, is it's really hard.
It is rare. That's spot on, and I think so much of being a leader is actually coming face to face with your own insecurities and moving past them so that you can help other people, because if every time we approach a conversation thinking, "What is this person going to think of me after we're done, and are they gonna dislike me?" then we have a really hard time doing the hard thing, which is having a really hard conversation that this person must hear in order to be successful in their life, and even if they don't receive it, it's still our job as a leader to share it, and
Mhm.
so this is such it's an interesting conversation because so often I think we struggle in this area to really move out of our own way so that we can help someone else. Like the reason we don't say it is because of our own self-reflection and that we don't wanna feel bad about having to say something versus, "Hey, this might feel bad in the moment, but I know that I care about this person. I actually wanna help them succeed. So I have to have this hard conversation in order to help them succeed."
Yeah, it's rich. And well, you measure success, right? A lot of times in, like, leaders like Jack Welch, or if you could pick any strong, legendary leader out of a hat, 80% of them are not known to be nice people, right? And they're able to have great business results because they can make tough decisions all the time.
Mhm.
Okay, you're not doing well, you're gone. I'm going to bring in somebody else who can do the job. Oh, they are so efficient and so sort of lacking emotion, but they're providing good jobs, good income, and they're building these really, really robust, large organizations. Most of the people don't have enough of those traits to build their organizations to a size that people are going to write books about them. So sometimes as a leader, you're saying, hey, who do we want to be? Do I really want to? No, we're true. We're at 93 agencies. Do I want to be at 200? Do I want to grow the bottom line? How much does margin matter? And then we're in a world where with tons of mergers and acquisitions, a lot of private equity involved,
Mhm.
Sometimes you can lose the soul of a business
Yeah.
by being so metrics focused. So you throw all that jumble up in a gumbo and say, okay, leader, figure it out.
Mhm.
Determining who you are and what path you want on, but it just becomes what path you want to be on is very important.
Yeah. Well, I'd love to know, looking back on your leadership journey over the last 10 plus years since you started all this, what would you say are some things that are just leadership lessons that you want to pass on to this audience around,
Mm.
hey, if I could have done it differently, these are one or two things that I know you embracing authentically who you are was such a critical part of that journey. And I don't think people really can appreciate how important that is to be true to you. One of the things we say on this podcast all the time is break the box and set it on fire. Why?
Mhm.
Because it sucks to live in a box and it is demeaning, it's demoralizing sometimes, it's challenging. So break the box, like figure out who you want to be and go do that. And I wonder for you, like what were those break the box moments where you were like, I gotta be me?
Yeah. Well, I will start this by saying I'm a contrarian by nature. And my wife or really good friends listen to this, they will be nodding along, sometimes to my detriment. I will play devil's advocate. I hate being told what to do. So I'll say one of the things that I've learned is that, I started true at 45, and maybe that's because I was not prepared or mature enough to do something like this before then, but I should have done something like this earlier. I should have taken a risk
Mhm.
to be myself, to unabashedly say, yes, I can enjoy this. I can be silly. I can do all the fun things and grow a pretty nice business. So one of the things I learned is I started a little late. So I would encourage anybody listening that, if that's you, don't be reckless, but go do your thing, right? Like go do your thing. I think listening with empathy is something that, this maturity thing is real. I'm sure I'm 55 now. I'm sure when I'm 65, I'll look back at the 55-year-old me and go, God, you were pretty stupid. But being around a while now, I think when you're younger, you think you have, well, a lot of people continue this behavior, but you think you've got it figured out. Listening is a superpower. I'm talking when people say, what superpower do you want to have? Invisibility or flying or super strength. They should add being the best listener in the universe.
Wow.
Because if you start paying attention to how few people, when you're having a conversation with them, really care about you, it is maybe 10%.
Yeah.
And training yourself, which sometimes it takes that, because the natural thing for us to do is to, you tell me a story, I tell you a story, you tell me a story, I tell you a story, and just listening, asking questions, thoughtful questions, provoking questions, preparing. Like I gave my first keynote the other day, by the way, my first real keynote presentation recently.
Awesome.
And it was pretty much about listening. It was called 4 Words to Change Your Life, but it's pretty much about listening. And I did an exercise at the table that was, I had people write down, the audience could do this, write down someone that you know a little bit that you want to know better, right? You know them a little bit, but this is somebody in your life. It could be a client, it could be work, it could be something else. And then write down 3 or 4 questions that are probing, not surface level, but that you would use if you want to get to know them better. And then they did that. And I said, wouldn't this be great if you had time to do this in real life? And they were like, yeah, this would be great. And I'm like, oh, well, you can prepare. So I think if there's one thing, it's listening with empathy and curiosity if I would go back, I would do that earlier and more often.
That's so good. I can't believe we're out of time. I think you're going to just have to come back and join us again. What final thoughts would you leave with our listeners today?
Final thoughts. Kindness always wins. I know that sounds hokey and cheesy, but real kindness, caring about other people, there's never going to be too much of that. And I think if you could look at everybody that you interact with in your life, and before you kind of go into the interaction, say, I love you to that person, just inside. Because when you love someone, you can have a different conversation. So I wish more of us could do that and have the patience to do that.
It's a powerful final thought. Where can people find and follow you, Scott?
They, LinkedIn, Scott Smith, there's about 1 million of us out there. So True Network of Advisors, Scott Smith on LinkedIn, TrueNetworkAdvisors.com. If you want to, I've started a new concert series in my hometown of Lake Gunnersville, Alabama called Shh. If you want to go into LakeCityConcerts.com, you can have some fun and join us for a concert sometime too.
You have one coming up soon, don't you?
We have October 23rd, Mark
Yeah.
Broussard. Yeah.
It's awesome. I was checking that out the other day. I was like, what is this?
Mhm.
And I love the backstory of what's going on there. So I'll have to learn more. Well, Thank you for your time today. This has been so much fun, and you are somebody that lives out who you are. So I love that about you, Scott. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Well, to our listeners, thank you for joining the Innovation Meets Leadership podcast. Remember, don't just get out of the box, break the box and set it on fire. Let's go transform something.
Thank you for joining us for the Innovation Meets Leadership podcast. Be sure to subscribe to our show on iTunes. Follow us on Instagram or Facebook at Innovation Meets Leadership, and visit our site at innovationmeetsleadership.com for more innovation resources.
Hey, my new book is out, Set It on Fire, The Art of Innovation. Click on the link to learn more. And don't just get out of the box, break the box and set it on fire. Let's go transform something.